Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Leahy. I'm the country manager for Click in Australia and New Zealand. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar with today's topic is Beyond the Data Asset. And we're lucky enough again to have Donald Farmer joining us today. And what Donald's going to talk to us about today is data and analytics as a new line of business. And data without analytics is really a wasted resource, and analytics without action is a wasted effort. But when you bring data, analytics, and action together, businesses transform. Organizations are constantly looking for insights that lead to better business outcomes and new business opportunities. In particular, that's relevant in today's environment. Many businesses now are turning to data and analytics for insights into new products and services that can increase revenue. In this webinar, we will discuss the business value of data and introduce simple models and strategies for developing actionable data assets. We'll have two speakers today. Our first speaker is Donald Farmer, and our second speaker is Aaron Young, who is a Click solution architect. Firstly, to introduce Donald, as some of you may know, Donald's an internationally respected speaker and writer with over 30 years of experience in data management and analytics. He advises investors, software vendors, and enterprises on data and analytics strategy. In addition to working with startups, Donald led teams at Microsoft and Click, building some of the most important and innovative analytic platforms on the market. His consultancy, Treehive Strategy, works globally with teams from the newest startups to some of the world's largest businesses. In addition to data and analytics strategy, Donald frequently consults on governance and compliance issues, particularly for companies implementing self-service architectures. His workshops on innovation strategy have helped to drive significant changes in numerous businesses in fields as diverse as fashion design and high-tech manufacturing. It's my pleasure to have Donald Farmer join us today and provide us with his view on data and analytics as a new line of business. I'm going to hand over to you, Donald.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm delighted to be with you again. It's such a fascinating time to be talking about data and such a fascinating time to be talking to anyone in the business world. It's my topic. I've chosen this particularly because as I look at my past experience, and I'm afraid it is over 30 years when I look at it, I have seen many downturns in the market. And one of the things that people always look for is, how can I save money? That's probably the top issue that people are looking for. How can we control costs? But there's something which may actually be more valuable than that, which is how can we get the most out of the investments we have already made? And that's really something that I'm kind of passionate about, because there's a tremendous amount of value locked up inside our businesses, locked up inside our organizations, whether we're public organizations or private organizations, whether we're commercial or whether we're a public service. There's tremendous value, both monetary, cultural, and of great assistance to people locked up inside our existing technologies and our existing investments, if only we could get that out. So what I'd like to talk to you today is about how we can go beyond that and really start to use data as an asset. In this presentation, I want to go beyond the usual cliche of saying that data is an asset to talk about how data can actually help you to do business in a different way, to create and affect new lines of business. And I think that's quite important. It's a cliche that we treat data as an asset. And in fact, it's true. Data is a very, very important part of our business. But something we overlook is that increasingly, data is our business. Let me give you an example of that I think is actually quite telling. To do that, I have a basic framework. The framework is in 3 levels, if you want to think of it that way. The first level is that you can simply enhance your current business. You can do business better than you're doing it today. And data and analytics has an important role to play in that. The next level is the added value new business. That gets pretty interesting. That's where you can add new value to your existing business model, but the business model basically remains the same. And then there's high value new business, where you're actually introducing new analytic forms and new data assets, which can then be leveraged to create new lines of business or new types of business, or for that matter, new ways which are so radical of doing your existing business that it frees you up to do other things, or it enables you to take actions in a way that are much more effective than you can do today, effectively creating a new way of running your existing business. So these are the three levels: enhancing, adding value, and then high value new business. And I'm going to walk through this in a little bit of detail to show you how this can build up. And along the way, we'll mention some of the technologies that Qlik have that help you to enable this asset framework. The asset framework, by the way, is vendor neutral, but Qlik have many of the technologies in place and many of the platform technologies in place in particular that help to make this come alive for you in your business. We can start with the very first step. I always think this is the simplest thing, which is let's just integrate and augment our existing line of business data. Let's just do better analytics on what we've got today. And that actually can help you very markedly. I've got some color coding in here, which you'll notice later on. The little kind of yellow bars here, the yellow indicator, simply means that there's a bit of effort needed to do this. It's not automatic. It's not just there for you. It takes some work to integrate your data sources. It takes some work to augment your data sources with other data or with new analytics, for sure. It's not onerous. It's not red, but it takes a little bit of effort to get there. But this is basically the first step that we can all take. We can integrate and augment our existing line of business data to improve whatever it is we're currently doing. Just to give you an idea, I love this slide, which I used to use when I was at Qlik, which is a few years ago now, of the big 7 analytic scenario patterns. But these are 7 analytic questions you can ask that, when you bring them to your existing data, really give you greater insight than before. So what's driving this particular number? How are things connected? Is there an outlier? How are things similar? How are things different? How often does it happen? How's it going? All questions that we're probably asking every day at the moment because we're in this global crisis, but very compelling questions to ask. These scenario patterns, if you apply them to your existing line of business data and you apply them thoroughly, you can look at any one of your existing data assets and say, which of these 7 questions can I address to this problem? And you will enhance your current business if you can do that. So it's a first step. It's a relatively simple step, bit of effort involved, a bit of thinking involved, but it's super valuable first step to take. Another thing you can do beyond that, actually start to integrate other forms of data. And I say here social or unstructured data. The truth is, if you look around your business, there's a ton of data that you have not yet brought into analysis. There's data which is in documents, possibly data which is in images or audio files, but one way or another, there's data that you have not yet brought in. And if you're in any business which is B2B or B2C, you can almost guarantee that there are rich social network sources, business network sources out there who are discussing your business that you can bring in. I worked with a cereal manufacturer, makes breakfast cereals, who now use Instagram and Facebook and Twitter messages about their products to track quality issues, to track reaction to new products, and to track any difficulties with supply or availability, which has been very interesting in the last few weeks. And they do that just by analyzing Twitter and by analyzing Instagram and Facebook. You'd be surprised how many people tweet and Instagram about their breakfast. It's really enough for this company to get pretty rich insights from it. So this is the next step. Having integrated and augmenting your existing data, what other data is out there? And I've actually colored this green because this is actually a fairly easy step. If you've already done the work of integrating and augmenting existing data, bringing in some unstructured data, bringing in some social media information, some social network data, is pretty straightforward to do and add a lot of value to your existing business and your existing analytics. Another step beyond that is augmented analytics. And I have this as red. It's sort of interesting because what red means for me is there's a new technology involved here which you may not already have, or which you may not already be aware of or already using. It's another technological step. What's interesting today for Qlik users is that Qlik has largely taken that step for you. There's a lot of augmented analysis which is available in Qlik, more or less automatically. But you do have to learn how to use it, and you do have to think about using it a little bit, but it's there. So maybe, in special circumstances, I would color this a little differently, but I do think of it as an additional form of work. So what is augmented analytics? Augmented analytics is where we use artificial intelligence or machine learning to augment human understanding of the data. So if you're looking for patterns, if you're looking for outliers, you're looking for spikes, you're looking for drops in the data, you could sometimes spot that as a human being, but augmented analytics can not only spot it for you, it can do it with a consistency, with a speed, and at a scale that you can't do yourself. So augmented analytics is tremendously valuable from that point of view, and that's another layer of enhancing your existing business. The next step beyond that is predictive analytics, and that is another step really beyond, and that requires you to take another technological step, and it actually requires you to take another step in your own thinking about your business, because predictive analytics is only as good as the data that you provide to it, but also what you get out of predictive analytics is really only as good as your understanding. What I mean from that is that it's one thing to make a prediction that your sales are going to increase or your sales are going to fall over the next quarter, but only you as a human being or only you as an analyst to know whether that is something which emerges from the prediction itself, or whether that is, for example, the seasonal variation. And sometimes, predictive analytics can take account of those things, but not always. Predictive analytics, rather like augmented analytics, it's a human being and the machine working together which really makes a difference. But for me, predictive analytics is a step where you really need to have a data engineer or a data scientist in place who can make that extra step for you, because there's so much complexity involved in understanding the data that goes into a model, the quality of the model that's built, and the quality of the results that come out. So I think of this as one step beyond augmented analytics. Augmented analytics for most people is going to be enough. So I have this at the far right-hand side. Predictive analytics needs a high degree of analytic skills and, frankly, a high degree of effort to make it work effectively. Augmented analytics, less so. And for many of us, augmented analytics, especially nowadays with new technologies, is going to be convenient and effective enough. Going on from that, then, there's this next level, which is how can I add value to my business? How can I add some new business which is going to give me some extra value? It's not the high value new business, it's just an extra income, perhaps extra revenue, or even just extra value that you can provide to your suppliers, your clients, your customers. And one of the greatest ways of doing that actually is to give them data. Make your data an asset that you can share. You can package it up. You can take things like listings or reference data, making your product catalog available to your suppliers so that they can optimize around that. Taking information about your suppliers, about your various suppliers, anonymizing it, and then selling it back to the suppliers so they can optimize their supply chains. Almost all supermarkets, for example, now do this, originally pioneered by Walmart in the US and Tesco in the UK, but now companies all over the world are doing this. Woolworths certainly do this. They package up their data, anonymize it so that suppliers can't see what others are doing, but then sell it back in an aggregated form so that people can see the trends and patterns in purchasing, so that they themselves can then optimize the offerings they make to Tesco, Walmart, or Woolworths in order to do that. So that's one really valuable way in which you can do this. There's another step beyond this, which is putting services around that. So for example, if you could take your package data, reference data, and you could make a lookup service, you could make a ticker, you can make a feed, you can make an app, you could make a web service, which acted as an endpoint for this data. So people don't need to download the data. They can just interact with your web API, for example, and they could integrate that into their application. So then they could build an app which integrated with your business. And that's a relatively straightforward step to take. If you've already got data as a service, making the listings as a service or making packaged services around that data is actually pretty straightforward. Now, one of the advantages of Qlik is that Qlik has Data Market, which is designed especially to do this. Data Market is actually one of the best platforms out there for creating a marketplace of data and data-related services, and includes all the technologies you need for hosting and securing and billing and all those things to make data available as a service. So adding value as a new business with data is a great next step that you can take surprisingly easily if you've already done some of the kind of pre-work of integrating your line of business data, pulling in other data sources. To go beyond that again, the next step that I think is interesting is when you start to add high-value new business. And those typically will be brand new lines of business. One area, for example, is if you've created data sets that you've packaged up, listings and reference data, you can now take external data. You can take data which is already there on Qlik Data Market, mash it up with your existing data, or you can take external data and do your own analytic work on it, or you can take your own data, add additional analysis, and now monetize that data set. Now, the truth is, unless your data set is inherently high value, most people are unwilling to pay very much for data. What they are willing to pay is for insight. And so if you add insight on top of this monetizable data set, then you've got another line of business. You're selling data as an asset, and you now have insights as an asset. Now, why would you do that? Well, one of the reasons is because you understand your data, your scenario, your business model better than anyone. You understand what insights are going to be most valuable. I'll give you an example of this. There's a client of mine who works in the quality management space. And they're tracking quality management issues for a lot of companies, many of them, of course, in manufacturing. And one of the things they can do is understand what are the quality issues that people are seeing across different manufacturing groups. They can anonymize that data and share it back in the form of benchmarks. So now you can see, for example, that I'm working in auto manufacturing and I have more quality issues than the average company in my space. In other words, I'm kind of worse than normal when it comes to quality. Another client of mine is in the construction space, and they enable construction companies to compare their safety issues on site, such as accident data. They can compare that with trends in the industry. And that's actually pretty important for them because at particular times in construction, for example, if it's a bad winter, it's very wet, which is always a bad time in construction sites, or maybe it's frosty or icy in some places, or maybe there's been some weather incidents, you can compare your data with other companies which are anonymized so that you can benchmark against them and you can see, yes, our accidents went up this winter, but everybody else's accidents went up more. You know, we increased our accident rate by 10%, but everybody else went up by 20%. So actually we did pretty well, even though we saw an increase. You wouldn't know that unless you were able to benchmark. Other things which are common as insights as a service, which you might be familiar with, are recommendation engines. Recommendation engines will often aggregate data across an entire customer space, working out what other customers are doing, and then using that to make recommendations to a particular customer. So, for example, if you are on Netflix, a famous example, it'll recommend movies to you based on what other people enjoyed. Or you're in online retail, we're all familiar with getting recommendations about people who bought this, bought that. That kind of recommendation engine, again, relies on taking a much broader view of the data than one customer can have, aggregating it, anonymizing it, and then basically servicing it back to the customer. And if you're doing that in a commercial sphere, it's actually possible to charge for that service, and it can be a very valuable service. Or it can just be a way, of course, of encouraging people to spend more with you, in which case the value emerges from that. The final kind of step, if you like, I don't want to call it the ultimate because that's not quite right, but the final step in the sense that it's a high-value new business and it requires a high degree of analytic skills and effort, is if you want to build analytic, embeddable applications that are smart and intelligent about what is going on. Examples of this would include intelligent workflow. Some of you might be aware have used, I guess not anymore, but many of us have been using extensively online travel booking sites. And some of those online travel booking sites are very intelligent in the sense that they can handle the entire process of choosing a vacation through choosing to travel, choosing the hotel, even choosing the activities you want to do, rolling that into a single service and then providing a sort of concierge-style service around that. And that would be an example of using intelligent workflow because it has to understand things like when does your flight arrive, so when do you need a hotel, and when does your flight leave, so when do you need to check out of the hotel, and what are the services that you might need in between. So maybe not a good example now that we're not traveling anymore, but at the time, this was actually a very good example of intelligent workflow. But another area that almost every business can benefit from is intelligent alerting. Now, intelligent alerting is useful because alerts, frankly, are rarely just a question of, if something increases by 50%, tell me about it. If temperature goes above, 32 degrees, tell me about it, whatever. If temperature drops below zero, tell me about it. Those are very basic alerts. And frankly, it's relatively simple to set them up. What's much more difficult to set up is an alert which is sensitive to a wide range of conditions and which also understands things like trends and patterns. Is this an exception? Is this an outlier in an existing pattern? Not just is this a high temperature, but is this an outlying temperature above a normal range? That's more difficult to tell. And sometimes temperature increases gradually, and sometimes it decreases gradually. And so a high temperature might not be an outlier. It might just be part of an overall trend. Other times you might want an alert which is very specific, requires some specific configuration around it. So I think alerting systems and intelligent workflow are actually, very, very important applications in the sense that they can bring very specific business scenarios and very high value business scenarios into action for basically any enterprise, any company that has a data-driven business. It does take some work to do it. We're going to see later that Click has done some really remarkable work recently in making intelligent alerting much easier to get working in your system. But still, you need to think about the alerting system. It takes some design. It takes some careful thought from you about what it is that you want to enable. But this can be a very high value offering if this is something that you can make available to people. Now, how do you do this? How do you get through this framework, or how would you even start executing on this framework? I'm very keen on a model that, to be honest, I developed myself, so I suppose I should be keen on it. But I call this approach taking a game plan rather than a roadmap. And what I mean by a game plan is, if you set out to play a game of soccer, for example, your coach will have a strategy, and the opposing coach will have a strategy. But of course, nobody knows quite what's going to happen. At any one time, all sorts of things go wrong. Your leading player can get injured. Somebody gets sent off. The other team happens to be just playing better than they've ever played before. And we've all seen those kind of upsets in the field of sports. So you can't have just a strategy for a sports game. It's not as if you could just follow these rules and everything will work out, because you never know what's going to happen on the field of play. As a result, what you need is a game plan, which is actually very flexible and can adapt to conditions as they emerge. And I prefer that approach rather than the rather static approach of a roadmap, which is we know where we're going to go, we know the steps we're going to take, let's just head there. So I actually lay out my strategy, if you will, for clients and for businesses. Actually, I make it look a bit like a game board with 2 dimensions to it. The vertical dimension is just increasing advancement of technology, starting with reporting and visualization through exploration and discovery, the kind of thing that you can do, of course, so effectively in Click, prediction and patterns, And then intelligence and autonomy, which would be, real AI, robotic process automation, or very, very kind of intelligent agents that were able to make their own decisions and act on their own. So, starting from reporting and visualization, which is kind of very basic, it's just a way of presenting data, exploration and discovery, a way of working with data and exploring and finding things, prediction and patterns, where some of that is automated, and then right up to intelligence and autonomy, where the system is basically kind of running itself. Along the horizontal axis, we can kind of move from ad hoc use. Well, this is something we do when we need to. Tactical use, this is something that we do regularly, but we do it for specific purposes. Strategic, well, no, this is our business. We strategize around doing this. This is part of our plan, is to do this. And then finally, cultural, which is, this is just so much part of our business that we can't help doing it. It's just the way we do business. And one of the things I always want to emphasize to people is that, first of all, there's no one place on this chart where you could locate your business. Your business would actually be located all over this chart. It may well be, for example, that your enterprise reporting, your financial reporting is strategic, and it's just using reporting and visualization, so it's on that bottom line. On the other hand, you might be using something like Excel, and frankly, Excel is cultural for a lot of people. It's the tool they just turn to whenever they feel like it. If you're using Click, you may well have exploration and discovery as a cultural kind of feature. On the other hand, prediction of patterns might be something that you just do ad hoc, because you're not doing it on every project, but now and then there's a project that you might need it for. And this becomes pretty interesting. You might have, reporting and visualization as something, again, which is, cultural. You're using it all the time in the business. Every now and then, tactical reasons, you have to do exploration and discovery, so you fire up Click and you start exploring using the green, white, and gray. And so you would be there on the roadmap. And you can even find, of course, that different departments are in different places. The next thing that's really important is that it's not a race to the top right-hand side. I kind of draw this way and say, yeah, there's an increase in skills to go vertically. There's more diverse data as you go into cultural uses. There's more variety of tools. There's more complexity as you head in those directions. But it's not a race to the top right-hand side. It's not like the Magic Quadrant where everybody needs to be up here in the top right-hand side. It's actually a question of where is the appropriate place for you to be on this diagram. And where are you today? And where is appropriate for you to be? And therefore, what steps can you take in order to get there? And that's where the modeling becomes really interesting. So in this case, for example, this is a sample that I built for a client. It's a real sample, but it's been modified a little bit from the work that they did. And so, for example, we started off with integrating and augmenting data, just the first step, as I nearly always think people have to take. And that's kind of ad hoc use of reporting and visualization. We'll do that as we need to. But what we really want to do is make this more tactical, something that we do, provides value frequently to us. So now we focus on, modeling decisions and adding better visualization in there. But now we want to kind of move up to enable exploration and discovery. And we want that to be tactical, strategic. We want our middle managers absolutely to be using a tool like Click, so they're exploring and discovering. And then we can work through this. Ultimately, people wanted to get to the point where they had bots and agents, chatbots, for example, in place. We wanted smart, intelligent alerts, and we wanted that to be something that was used throughout the business. And what you can see here is that there's a number of different steps. There's about 8 steps, 10 steps in this game plan. One thing that's very important is that each one of these steps is itself a valuable and useful project. Even if you only did the first one, integrating and augmenting data for reports and dashboards, you'd have made your business better. But as you move through and execute these different projects, you build up a portfolio of capabilities. This is not intended to be one huge project which takes years to deploy. Frankly, we just don't have time, resources, or energy to do that. It's better to focus on small, well-defined projects that are very carefully chosen to advance you one step towards where you want to be, and to make that one step valuable in itself. So this is why I call it a kind of game plan. It's very flexible. You could stop it at any point. And you can branch off in different directions depending on what happens at one stage. If you've actually been doing exploration and discovery and it's been successful, you could move to adding insight, adding comparative analysis, or maybe moving towards predictive KPIs. If it turns out that actually you don't have the resources, you don't have the finance, you don't have the energy to take that further, you could just stop there. But you might work on another branch, such as adding prediction and trends and classification analysis, and maybe even eventually delivering bots and agents. In other words, there are numerous ways of getting to where you need to be with a game plan like this. So I kind of talk through this, the data asset framework itself, and the way in which you might approach a game plan in order to deliver where you need it to be within that asset framework. Just want to kind of finish off again then with reminding you about the data asset framework, the way in which you can step through from enhancing your current business to adding new business value to high value new business. And just to remind you, one of the last things there is that intelligent alerting is one of those kind of advanced features which can add tremendous new value to your business. And Click has been doing some work in that space. And so what I'd like to do now is we could switch over to Aaron, and we'll actually see, kind of walk you through what this intelligent alerting feature is. So let's move over to that, and I'll leave you with this thought that your data assets, you can move beyond that to find new value in your business with data and analytics. And now let's see what Click can do for us with their new features.
Over the next 10 minutes, I'll take you through a demonstration of Click Alerting. Click Alerting is an intelligent alerting platform providing sophisticated, data-driven alerts that help users proactively monitor and manage their business. With Click Alerting, organizations can manage by exception and prompt action based on insight, increasing the value of analytics. Let me start by providing an overview of what Click Alerting is. Click Alerting is a proactive alerting platform for ClickSense. It lets business users know when data has changed and crosses certain thresholds. But it's more than just threshold-based alerting. Click Alerting allows business users to create sophisticated alerts from within a Click application themselves. As a business user, I have access to a variety of different conditions such as greater than, less than or equal to evaluations, statistical calculations, comparing measures against each other, and many more. With Click Alerting, when an alert is triggered, we can drive a user back to the sheet within the Click application with any relevant selections applied so that the data can be analysed in context. This ultimately allows people to focus on things that matter. It helps them focus on the data that is most important in their Click application and helps them to manage by exception. When users are only focusing on what matters, it reduces dashboard fatigue. Dashboard fatigue can surface when you have so much data you don't know where to focus or investigate. Organizations can create as many dashboards as they want, but that doesn't automatically mean they will get used and consumed. Let's get into the demonstration today. I'm a director of a sales organization. I'm responsible for 3 districts: Central, East Central, and Northeast. I have access to an executive dashboard that allows me to monitor the performance of stores and store managers, as well as monitor KPIs against targeted values. Now overall, the company is doing well. Our commit to target percent is currently at 98.7%. Looking at the individual districts for the quarter, I can see that East Central is slightly behind expectations. They have 8.1 million in commit with a target of 9.1 million. Now the commit to target percent is slightly above 89%. Now, that's not too alarming at this stage. However, I don't want them to fall much further behind where they currently are. Now, the challenge is I'm a busy person. I don't have time to jump into my application every single day to check this value. I only look at this application when I have to or for urgent matters. Now, as the Director of Sales, I need to be able to monitor this situation to see if it will affect my overall numbers. Now, as a business user, I can create an alert for myself. An alert is simply notifying me or others when conditions are met. Let's go ahead and do that. In the top right of my sheet, I have a Create Alert button. When I select this, I'm presented with the Alert Creation wizard. I'm going to call my alert East Central Sales Monitor. For our description, let's call it Alert to Monitor East Central Performance. Now, the next step that I need to do is define the measures and or dimensions that I want this alert to be based off. I can select them from the drop-down list, or I can visually select the objects in my application. Now, this approach makes it easy and fast for anyone to create an alert off the data. Let's choose our Commit to Target KPI and add this as a measure. On the next step, I now need to define some conditions. We can leave the column value as is, as that is our KPI we selected earlier. For the operator condition, you can see I have a range of operators available to me. Next, I need to define conditions. In Click Alerting, there are a number of different condition types you can apply to your data. The manual value condition type allows you to create threshold-based alerts. For example, I might want to know if my KPI number goes above, below, or is equal to a certain value. The measure condition type allows you to compare the current measure against another measure. For example, I might want to know whether a district commits number exceeds their target number. The previous scans condition type allows you to check the current measure value against historical numbers. For example, I might want to know if my total sales fall below 2% upon the previous month. And finally, the set condition type allows you to create various types of aggregation and statistical functions as conditions for your alerts. This is helpful for identifying outliers and anomalies within your data. In this demonstration, we want to know if the East Central District falls below 85%. So we'll need to create a manual value condition type with a value of 0.85 to represent 85%. I'm now in the final step of creating my alert. Here, I add any additional options to my alert. I want to be notified every time when my data reloads if my condition is met, so I'll leave the frequency as default. I can choose my communication channels if this alert is triggered. I'm going to keep this as all. That means I'll get notified via emails and via mobile notifications. My alert is now being created. If I wanted to see the detail behind the alert I've created, I can select Detailed View and it will show me the details for this alert. This will open up the Click Alerting web application. We can see details such as application name, measures, and any other details that we've defined in our alert. Now, I could modify any part of the alert here in this screen, but I'm going to leave my alert how it is. Let's head to the main tab of the Click Alerting web application. Now, the Click Alerting web application can be used by a number of users, such as business users who create alerts from a ClickSense application. It can be used by power users to create alerts on behalf of others, or it can be used by administrators to create system alerts or send broadcast notifications to a wider audience. While in the Click Alerting web application, I want to create another alert that notifies me if store managers' commit values fall below their target values, so I know who to help and who to assist. Let's go ahead and create this alert from the Click Alerting web application. I want to call this alert Store Managers Commit Below Target. Let's go ahead and select our application. One of the key features of click alerting is being able to provide results in context. Now that means if an alert is triggered, I want to be able to select the link in my email or mobile notification and be taken to the sheet within the application. I want to be redirected to the performance overview sheet, so let's go ahead and select that. We want to compare our commit measure against the target as a second measure. You can see that click alerting is building a view of my data. It's showing us a view of our commit versus our target. Next, I'm going to use this very useful drill to dimension capability. I want to assess commit versus target at a store manager level. Now notice when I select store manager, click alerting rebuilds the view of my data. This evaluates commit versus target for every store manager within my organization. For the next step, I need to create the condition for my alert. I can create many types of conditions for my alerts. Now this allows me to cater for any alert use case that I might have. For my condition, I'm going to set commit as the first column. For type, I need to select measure because I want to compare the results of commit to another measure. The operator is less than, and my compare with value is my target. Now after my conditions are set, I can go ahead and validate my alert. And this will allow me to see how many store managers currently meet my condition. We can see that 48.1% of my store managers currently have a commit that is less than their target. Let's go ahead and choose the schedule. We will leave this as a default option to trigger on reload. However, it is in this step where I can define a specific schedule. When we create an alert in the Click Alerting web application, we have some additional capability for distributing alerts. We can choose channels like we did earlier, and I can also choose to distribute this to individuals or groups of people within my organization. For example, I might want the district managers to know if this alert is triggered for a store manager within their district. Here, I can also customize the notifications, such as add my corporate logo or colors, as well as adding any additional text. Let's save our alert and head to the main tab of the Click Alerting web application. You can now see that we have two alerts against our Performance Overview application. One we created via the sheet within the application, and the other we created through the Click Alerting web application. What I've done in the background is reloaded my application that these alerts are based on. While that's working in the background, let me briefly cover other types of alerts that you can create in the Click Alerting web application. Here you can see we can create three types of alerts. Data alerts allow a ClickSense user to create a variety of alerts which will check their data in a ClickSense application, just like the alerts we created earlier. I can also create system alerts. A system alert allows me to check the reload tasks in a ClickSense application. It can provide an early warning when things are not working as intended, or it can provide a confirmation when things are on track. Finally, I can create a broadcast notification. Broadcast notifications allow an administrator to send formatted messages to groups and users in Click Alerting. For example, an administrator might wish to send a reminder message for downtime on key systems to ensure everyone is aware of what's happening. I can see that both of my alerts have been triggered. This particular email tells me that 15 store managers who have commit values lower than their targets. Now I need to act here. I can simply click on a store manager's name and this will take me to the application with the store manager applied as a selection. Now I'm viewing the data in context to my alert so I can act further. While I've received these notifications via email, I've also received these notifications via the mobile application. And just like the links in the email, I get the same experience when I use the mobile application. Now that's everything I wanted to cover in this demonstration. You've seen how organizations can manage by exception and prompt action based on insight, increasing the value of analytics. Thank you.
Oh, that's excellent, Aaron. Really great to see the tie-in there with the actionable insight and that new capability that Click has brought out with the new alerting capability that really brings to life that ability to take advantage on an ongoing basis that data asset that you have, and really ties in well with what Donald was talking about. So thanks, Aaron, for giving us that presentation. That's really terrific. Now, I just wanted to let everyone know that there's an opportunity for Q&A. So we have a Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. You would see that there is Q&A there. And all you need to do is send through a message there, and we'll pick that up and we'll answer that. So you've got an opportunity to ask Donald a question on his presentation, or Aaron about some particular capability around the Click alerting. So we'll just allow you some time. You can just type in a question and you can put those through. While we're waiting for that, I might just go back to Donald firstly and just touch on a couple of things that he said. And Donald, it was really interesting for you to sort of lay out the framework and then also that sample game plan. I thought that was really useful. In our last webinar, you talked about innovation, and one of the things you talked about in innovation was, you know, being having the culture or the leadership around having that innovation mindset with the framework as well. Can you talk a little bit about what the sort of components on the sort of the culture and leadership aspects that are required to sort of implement that, and any sort of practical experiences you might have?
Yeah, so it's a super interesting question, because in many ways, when it comes to how you get the best out of existing assets and how you innovate within your existing frameworks, the thing you must do is lead with a culture of innovation and a culture of what I would call a culture of curiosity. And what I mean by that is, you know, you have to be awake to the possibilities that are there within the data. I don't think you can say to somebody, you know, the worst thing you can do is sort of sit people in a room and say, oh, well, we can't sit them in a room just now anyway, but sit them on a webinar and say, be creative, be innovative. Let's use our data assets in a new way. And, you know, just putting that sort of, throwing it out there, nobody can really do that. We need, to a certain extent, we need structure, which is something that I've been trying to give you a sense of frameworks that you can use. But the other thing is you need, literally need practice at it. So my one advice, whether it comes to data literacy, whether it comes to innovation, or whether it comes to using data as an asset, my one advice to leaders is you've got to live that way. You've got to lead that way. If you want your team to be data literate, you have to communicate with data so they know that communicating with data is important. If you want your team to be innovative, you have to show that you can also be innovative and that you're willing to take the risks that are involved in innovation. And if you're wanting to move beyond data as a cost center into data as an asset, you've got to show that you live with that belief as well, and that you are using data consistently in new ways. And then you'll encourage your team to understand that this is something not only that they can do, but that they should be doing in their work. So I think from the point of view of leadership, it's very much a question of living the life that you want them to live. You have to lead by example in questions of both literacy, innovation, and data as an asset.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So I think the other thing that we're seeing, I mean, you talk about organizations sort of taking that next step from, collecting data or what we used to do a long time ago about just, we spend a lot of time organizing data, but not having that action. We're seeing, due to the current health and economic situation, we're seeing organizations really adapting to that. And do you have any observations about how long that will last, or do you think that that culture hopefully will permeate some of the organizations that, okay, they've had to adapt, and we see healthcare organizations using data quite well. We see, some financial institutions using it better because their investors are telling them we need to know what's going to happen because of the current crisis. What are your observations in terms of are holding out hope that those things sort of stick within the culture?
Well, the hope that they will stick within culture is a very positive one. The truth is, when you've adapted to something new, you never really go back. You don't quite go back to the status quo before, the status quo ante, because things have fundamentally changed in the way in which you do things. Once you've learned new techniques, once you've adopted new methods, then you're unlikely to go back to the old ways. I think an example we're all going to find is that we'll think twice about requiring people to be in place for a meeting. The idea of somebody joining a meeting virtually at one time would have seemed perhaps quite rude. Oh, I'm not coming into the office today for the meeting, I'll just dial in. In the future, that will be perfectly normal for people to do that, because we've all been doing it for weeks, if not months. And in the same way, when it comes to the way in which we use data, the way in which we use the insights that we can get, the fact that we're using them under pressure, when we go back to our business for what will be, the new normal, we will still have what we learned in those days. We'll still learn. I'll give you a very good example from the recent past. If you remember the terrible tsunami in Japan that caused so much damage, and the Fukushima earthquake and so on. We had some customers in Click who were using Click technologies at that time, and they had to learn very quickly in a crisis how to analyze their supply chains, which were hugely disrupted. And they learned a lot of things about how to make their supply chains more agile. Once that kind of disaster was over and things started to get back to normal, or for what passed for normal, they still kept those agile supply chains. They weren't going to go, well, let's no longer have an agile supply chain. They continued being agile in their supply chain management and using Click to oversee that. And I think that's that's important. We don't go back exactly to where things were. We take the best of what we've learned. But one of the things we can do is make sure that we, at least semi-formally, try to regroup and make sure that we understand what we learned, what worked, what didn't. And then sort of instrument that into our work.
That's a great answer, and I think that really holds a lot of hope around how businesses have adapted now and how they'll continue to work in the future. The Japanese example is a really good example there, and that's interesting to hear. And I think it takes a culture of wanting to continue to do something that actually worked really well in the past. Thanks, Donald, for that. We've got a question from the audience around how Click alerting is priced or licensed. So that's a pretty simple answer. It's an add-on to your ClickSense environment, and there is a one-off price for the Click alerting capability, and that will provide that alerting capability for your whole ClickSense license base. So that one-off price is quite affordable. So what I'd encourage you to do is talk to your reseller or talk to your Click account manager, and we can put you in touch with those as well if you would like. But it's a quite affordable add-on to your existing environment. So there's no individual user price. It's a one-off price for the capability. Hope that answers the question. Now, there's still a little bit more time, so if anyone has any other questions, you can send those through now. And it's just also an opportunity for either Donald or Aaron for you to have any closing comments.
Well, I think my closing comment to the attendees, and first of all to thank everyone for being here, is as you go back into business and start looking at what's happening in your organizations, it's really useful to think of what is it you're doing that could be better informed with better data, and then think about how you can take that beyond your organization. And by your organization, I could mean just your work group, or your subdivision within an organization, or within your organization as a whole, whether you're commercial or public. How can you take what you're doing and provide the value of it as a service to people outside your immediate organization? And if you think about it that way, you can start to identify some of those aspects of the data asset. And the other thing I would encourage is to think in terms of I like to use the phrase game plans rather than roadmaps. Think about what your map to the future looks like, but think of it as being flexible and made up of small, discrete steps, each one of which is valuable, because you never know what's going to happen along the way. That's very, very clear now that we never do know what's going to happen along the way. So we have to have plans where each step we take is valuable in itself. And I'd encourage you to think in that way as you make your future strategic plans and projects.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, in closing, on my side, Paul, just want to thank everyone for joining. If you do want more information on the Click Alerting product, we've got a wealth of information on our website, our help website. Feel free to reach out to your local sales rep, as Paul's already mentioned. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And thanks, Donald. And look, great to have you both on today's webinar. Donald, always a pleasure. Thank you for being such a great guest speaker and providing some real insight and some really practical tools in terms of the framework and then that game plan for getting there, and then how that can not only enhance your business but add value, and then adding high value there as well. And I think that tie-in with, it's not like going back in your career pre-self-service. There's now technological capabilities to help organizations get there as well. So you can have the vision, you can have the practical framework and game plan, but you can also have the technological capabilities to help you get there. So I really want to thank Donald again. And Aaron, great presentation. And if you do have any other questions on Click Alerting, please feel free to reach out to us. And Donald, look forward to having you as a guest in the future again.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and thanks for joining us today for the Click webinar.